All right, what's up? Welcome, everybody. It's another amazing live stream back with my good buddy Kai of Orthodox Shahada. And Kai had a great idea a while back to do a series on Islamic geopolitics. Of course, Orthodox Shahada has done a tremendous amount of work in the last few years, focusing on refuting Mohammedanism, Islamism, from both the internal critiques and the internal textual critiques of the Quran, the philosophical critiques, biblical critiques, etc., as well as our ongoing series against the Monophysites. So we're going to start another series as well, dealing with a set of geopolitical texts. So we won't be getting into all of those books today, but we could be kind of giving an introduction, an overview. Kai and I have both read several of the same texts. As you guys know, we have put a good bit of time and effort into this topic in the last several years. Of course, I was reading some of the Islamic geopolitical stuff before I knew anything really about the religion. So it's nice to be in this position where both Kai and I can kind of overlap and kind of read some of the same texts and get into some of the same information. So we're going to kick it off today. Of course, Kai has a great series of slides and whatnot that we're going to go to. But Kai, what made you think that this would be a good idea to do? I think it is. What keyed you into this, and what are some of the texts that you chose that we're going to be talking about, and what made you select those for today's lecture?
Right. So thanks for having me, Jay. I'm really excited to do the series. So one of the things that I think is very relevant to look at this topic in particular is up until now, we've really been covering Islam in a more kind of theoretical level, trying to understand it through the lens of Christianity, specifically Orthodoxy, trying to understand it from within the Islamic lens itself with its own paradigms. And it was really kind of like just a theoretical exercise, just looking at things intellectually. But now things are getting very serious with regards to the geopolitics on the world stage. A lot of things changing in Europe, in North America, the influence that Islam is having societally, the influence that Islam is having politically in all of these countries that are traditionally not Islamic, and the ghettoizations that you're seeing popping up in basically wherever Muslims are migrating to, and then the trend to want to start basically Islamicizing much of the rest of the world. And now it's to the point where it's like, okay, we need to start putting aside the theoretical understandings of what Islam teaches with regards to monotheism or whatever it may be, and actually look at what Muslims are doing. What is Islamic law? How are Muslim societies functioning? What are they doing in the West? How are they basically altering the landscape within the West and other traditionally non-Islamic countries, seeing how the powers to be um, are manipulating Muslims for their nefarious purposes, for global dominance, global control, the whole geopolitical landscape in this. And I think it's now about really informing people before it's too late. So one of the things that I want to aim with the series is to really inform people to know how their countries are undergoing drastic changes, and what the prospect looks like once Islam becomes dominant in these countries. To answer your other thing with regards to the types of books, really, I'm kind of just doing a big net to just catch whatever is written on the subject. In the presentation there, you just saw a sampling of books. Those are great books for people just getting into the topic to wet their feet in. It's kind of, though they're really good at opening your eyes to see how um, non-Muslim governments and agencies utilize Islam and utilize Muslims for their own purposes, whether it's like the CIA or whatever it may be, and why they would support Muslims, why they would support a seemingly Islamic cause. And it couldn't, books can be on like the Muslim Brotherhood, for example. I haven't really put those up on the screen, but those are very relevant. So really, I'm just trying to read everything that is within reasonable accessibility on the topic, but I'm also supplementing it with a lot of Islamic sources directly from within Islam itself to justify my analysis, to justify why I think the geopolitics is unfolding the way that it is. And I'll talk about that as we progress through the presentation and through the series.
Yeah, and a lot of this is partly, books that, as we said, I mentioned and have covered over the years. You guys recall we did some talks about 10 years ago on the channel on Dreyfus's book, Devil's Game, and Mark Curtis's book, Secret Affairs. In the case of Mark Curtis's book, it's important to remember that it's a Royal Institute for International Affairs supported text. In other words, Mark Curtis was a Royal Society researcher, so it's not a conspiracy text. Dreyfus was a Rolling Stones reporter and more of a mainline left-minded journalist, but that is also not a conspiracy text. So we're going to be focusing on more of the historical and academic and geopolitical sphere. We're not going to be looking at primarily any theoretical texts, but as Kai said, when we get into the geopolitical and historical, we're also going to be using Kai's analysis and insights to bounce it off of Islamic law, fiqh, tradition, and the Quran. And you guys, if you guys didn't know, on my channel, we did recently do a members talk on Paul Williams, who's an FBI consultant, his book on the Brotherhood of Al Qaeda. And we also did some years back another talk on a book that is relevant to this topic, which is Gould and Fitzgerald's book, Afghanistan's Untold Story, Invisible History, the History of Afghanistan. And I also have talks on the Curtis book and the Dreyfus book in the archives, and the other texts that are also very relevant to our discussion, which I don't have at this domicile. So that would be things like Blumenthal's Management of Savagery book, which we covered also a few weeks ago. And even some of the history of the Mossad text would also be relevant for this, although we are focusing on Islam here. So we're going to let Kai begin the talk, and I will be chiming in with my thoughts and insights. And of course, as you guys know, from modern Islamic setting, I guess you could say, in the modern world, you have to also know about the history of the British Empire, because that's a huge piece of the puzzle, particularly with the collapse of the Ottomans, the British alliance with various factions of Sunni Islam as a buttress against the Ottomans as they fell, the support for the Muslim Brotherhood, Wahhabism, Salafism, all of those things are going to come into play. So Kai, where do you want to kick off this conversation right now?
Okay, so I can just kind of go right into my slides, and basically this first part will be a little dry, but it is relevant because it's going to talk about Islamic law specifically. So before we get into the government agencies and whatnot, we're going to look at what Islam itself teaches about jihad. We're going to look at what is within the Muslim mindset. So even though the non-Muslim agencies will utilize Muslims for their purposes, the Muslims themselves, a lot of the times, actually believe in the teachings of Islam, and they are genuinely wanting to further the advance of Islam. And so it's very important to understand the mindset of Muslims in general. And so I want to focus heavily on the topic of jihad. And this is very important, in my opinion, because there is that oft repeated mantra that Islam is a quote unquote peaceful religion. Muslims will say that, non-Muslim politicians will say that. Everyone wants to convince you that Islam is a peaceful religion, that jihad is just something that is defensive or whatever it may be, but basically to minimize the threat that Islam itself poses at its very core, like what inherently Islam is meant to do in terms of global domination. So on this slide, you see here, I have a picture of a series of books, and that is a 25, I think it's 24 volume work. It's a recent publication. It is completely available for free online. For those who can't read Arabic, unfortunately, it is only in Arabic, but the author has made it available online for the benefit of those who cannot afford to buy it. Those are the two links where you can see this. Ibn Najjar al-Dimyati, that's the author. And what that compilation is, it's the entirety of Islamic law of all of the four main Sunni schools, the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali schools. And it's detailing in great precision the Islamic law on all topics, whether it's praying, fasting, marriage, divorce, jihad, it's all there. And not just that it's presenting the information, but it's presenting what is known as the mu'tamad, the relied upon positions of each of these schools. So these are the authoritative stances. If you belong to that particular school, this is what that school teaches. It's not just the opinion of one scholar here or there. It is what the school teaches, and it is what represents authentic Islam. Another set that I'm going to be relying on is it's like two volume works. This is for the Shafi'i school, for example. It's basically the khulasa. It's a summarized form of what we find in that set, just basically kind of not giving as much of the evidences, but more just stating what the laws are. And then also, I'm going to be relying on this five-volume work here. This is the Mu'tamad position of the Shafi'i madhab, the Shafi'i school. And this for anybody who is going to tell me that what I'm
Now,
presenting.
which one has to do with the Muad'Dib and the Qisas Haderach? I'm just joking. I hear these Arabic
Yeah,
terms and
that's
I
that's
think
the
of
Dune
Dune, but go
madhab.
ahead.
Yeah, the Dune madhab. But there's going to be a lot of people that are going to tell us that are going to probably say, "Oh, that is not Islam," or "That is not." You see this? You see that word right there? Mu'tamad. That is the authentic representation of Islamic law. There is no doubt whatsoever that what I'm going to be presenting from these sources is what Islamic scholars have said is the official position of Islam. And this is the four Sunni schools. And this is basically what is entailed by Islam when you talk about Islam. It's not just the opinion of some random person. Jihad means to fight the non-Muslims in order for Islam to become dominant. Islamic legal jurisprudence or fiqh states that jihad in the context specifically with regards to Islam means fighting, qital, the non-Muslims, al-kufar, in order to support the spread of Islam, linusratil Islam. Now, the phraseology here is quite revealing. The concept of Nasr is taken directly from the Quran and refers to the supposed eventual and inevitable dominance of Islam. So, for example, in chapter 110, verses 1 through 2 of the Quran, when Allah secure Nasrullahi and the triumph cometh, and thou seest mankind entering the religion of Allah in troops. So, in other words, Allah will always support the Muslim community or Ummah to wage jihad in order to spread Islam, just as how Muhammad was supported 14 centuries ago. The imagery and connection of Nasr brings comfort to Muslims because in waging jihad, they emulate Muhammad as the Quran indicates they should do, namely in chapter 33, verse 21. Verily, in the messenger of Allah, ye have a good example for him who looketh unto Allah in the last day and remembereth Allah much.
Quick question, Kai. I know this is kind of a basic level question, but we
Sure,
do have a lot of people that may not be familiar with all the ins and outs of Islam. So,
sure. Sure.
what is the source in your mind of this idea that Islam does not wage jihad like this anymore? It is only religion of peace. Where do you think that comes from?
So I will talk about that. That is in the presentation. That
Okay.
actually comes from Muhammad's own lifetime. I will talk about it in more detail, but basically, when Muhammad started his ministry, he was in Mecca, he was in the minority, and at that time, fearing any kind of reprisal, he could not engage in any kind of violent behavior or any kind of violent rhetoric. And so that is what's known as the Meccan phase, and I'll talk about it again later in the presentation. But that Meccan phase is where Islam is literally reduced to just peaceful coexistence with your non-Muslim neighbors. You preach to them, but you don't do anything forcible against them. You don't impose yourself on them. You teach them that religion, that Islam is peaceful. And that's where you get statements in the Quran like, to you is your religion and to me is my religion. And if you're a Jew or a Christian, you will still be saved, and you don't have to become a Muslim right now. So it's all of these peaceful, like verses in the Quran, but those are within the context when Muslims are in the minority and to avoid getting any kind of reprisal. And so this is the message that Muslims will put forward, that Islam is a peaceful religion. It comes from that, from historically from Muhammad's own lifetime. So continuing on, so this next part, this is literally taken right from this book here in the Mu'tamad of the Shafi'i fiqh. And it's a statement here that is very telling. And it says that jihad is the pinnacle of Islam. Now, this part here, I translated it myself directly. Um, this set, these series, these books that I'm relying on for Islamic law, they are not available in English. So this stuff I have to translate it myself. But the thrust here is that Islam is inherently violent and oppressive, with its primary purpose being to conquer the world and subjugate everyone under it. So forcible global Islamization is imperative to Islam. And this is what Islamic law is basically saying. It says jihad is the pinnacle of Islam. And those of you who know can read Arabic, you'll read the Arabic terms. And the way that pinnacle, I chose to translate it in that word, but what it literally means, it's like the top most part of the camel's hump, and that's the most important part. So that's the imagery that you're seeing as an Arab speaker when you're reading it.
By the way,
The
Kai, we have some people asking. You do have a Discord server, correct?
I do have Discord server, yes.
And it's active, and you focus a lot on these same topics, right?
Yes, we focus on the same topics. It hasn't been active for the last little while because I've just been busy with my own personal life things, but it is still there. People will be active in to whatever degree they are.
And
But
is that link on your channel? Can they get to that from your channel?
yes, yeah, yeah. If they
Okay.
go to the YouTube channel, they will see the link to the
Okay. People
Discord.
are asking, so I wanted to get that out there, but go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure, sure, for sure. And if you guys want to come to the Discord channel and Discord server and talk about these topics, I'm more than happy to when time permits. So yeah, so when you're reading it, this is the context, the way jihad is expressed, the pinnacle of Islam. It is among the most important characteristics of the religion, so much so that some scholars call it the sixth foundational constituent of Islam. So when you're studying Islam, you're taught that you have the testification of faith, the Shahada, that you have prayer or salat, that you have charity, zakat, that you have Saum or fasting, and you have Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. And so those are the kind of like the five pillars of Islam. And what this is saying is that jihad, by a lot of scholars, is kind of considered the sixth foundational constituent of Islam. And its purpose is to be the means by which the spread of Islam is achieved, namely the deliverance of the message of Islam to all mankind, thereby fulfilling what the Most High, i.e., Allah, said in addressing the Messenger of Allah, i.e., Muhammad, by tasking him and his nation, i.e., Muslims after him, and we have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to the worlds. And the Most High said, Say, O Muhammad, O mankind, indeed, I am the messenger of Allah to you all. So this is basically Islamic scholars recognizing that you've got Quranic verses that establishes Muhammad's message as for all of mankind. And so since Muhammad himself was personally not able to spread that message worldwide or globally, that task now falls on to the Muslims who follow after him generation after generation. That obligation to preach Islam to the entire world is extended to them. They have that obligation. Now, jihad is legislated by the Quran according to Muslim scholars. An example, you have Quran 22:39 that legislates defensive jihad or jihad dafi'. And you also have offensive jihad or jihad talab legislated in the Quran 973, for example. But there are many, many, many verses that legislate jihad. This is just an example. Jihad is also legislated by the Sunnah, according to Muslim scholars. And now the following is a hadith found in both Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. But there are many such hadiths. This is only just one example that I'm citing, and I'm citing it because it's popular for Muslim scholars to cite it themselves. And you'll see it cited in these law books. And it says, I have been commanded to fight the people until they testify that there is no deity except Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger, and establish the prayer and pay the charity. And if they do this, then their blood and property are secured, except by the rights of Islam, and their accountability is left to Allah. So this is specifically with regards to offensive jihad. Now, I want to mention something highly important with regards to this particular hadith. It is a very well-known tactic by Muslim apologists that whenever they are confronted with a damaging hadith that contradicts their message, they attempt to dismiss it away as if to say it is daif or weak, as if to doubt the contents or its binding nature. The above hadith I just mentioned, and which Muslim scholars themselves mention when discussing the topic of jihad, is found in both Bukhari and Muslim. This is very important. Highlighting this point is something that the Muslim scholars themselves do because such a hadith that is in both Bukhari and Muslim, is termed muttafaqun alayh, or agreed upon. In hadith methodology, this is the highest level of correctness and authenticity that a hadith can have. Such a standard is so highly regarded that stating that a hadith is muttafaqun alayh is proof enough of its authenticity. So Muslims have no way to explain away this hadith and others like it.
By
As
the
for
way,
interpret,
this
yeah,
is Kai. You're the first to be on when I've got my new camera angle here. So this is the Diva angle. This is the official Diva cam.
nice, nice.
Anyway, so it's good to
Yeah,
break it up and not have the same image every
yeah,
single time.
absolutely.
So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as for interpreting the various Quranic verses calling for jihad, um, because a lot of people who say that Islam is a peaceful religion, they're going to tell you you're interpreting these Quranic verses incorrectly. They don't mean offensive jihad, they mean just defensive. So, like if you get attacked, you have the right to defend yourself. No, you don't. You do, but you have the obligation to wage jihad. So, for example, the one previously mentioned verse 973, O Prophet, strive, Jahid, against the disbelievers and the hypocrites, be harsh with them. And in these books, pick them up right there, Islamic law explicitly comments on not just these types of verses, but this verse specifically, and it clarifies how it is to be understood. That is, in meaning, fight the non-Muslims by the sword, be safe. So those who can read Arabic, that's the Arabic that you will find written um, in those texts. So, in other words, this Quran verse and others like it are to be understood to mean that jihad is to be waged using the sword. Um, Chapter 9 of the Quran is filled with many such verses. Another one is chapter 2, verse 216. All of these verses you're going to see these Islamic law books quote. I'm just giving one example for the sake of brevity on the stream, but numerous verses are given by the scholars to justify offensive jihad, and that you're understanding it by using the sword. Now, there are liars and those uneducated who attempt to twist the meaning of jihad and claim it is merely a private spiritual struggle. They call this jihad of the nafs or soul. And this understanding has absolutely nothing to do with Islamic law or Sharia. And I'm putting this as for the benefit of the people who encounter this type of argument from Muslim apologists. From a purely legalistic standpoint, by which the Islamic State functions, remember, Islamic law for an Islamic State, nafs refers to the individual in the sense that jihad is personal, as in it is something you personally do, just as how you personally pray, personally fast, personally give charity, personally make the pilgrimage to Mecca, and so on. Jihad is to personally exert effort in helping spread Islam globally, i.e., what you personally do to bring about the global dominance of Islam. Jihad is not some private spiritual struggle that you do in the comfort of your own home. That is known as tazkiyat al-nafs. Okay, there is a completely separate um, doctrine for this spiritual struggle that you do privately in your own home. It's not jihad, it's something completely different, tazkiyat al-nafs. Jihad in the context of Islamic law is about Muslims versus non-Muslims. Jihad is obligatory, and there are two terms used in Arabic, wujub and fard. Now, this is going to be a little bit technical, but I just want to mention it. While the Hanafi school of jurisprudence distinguishes the two, the other three schools basically treat wujub and fard as synonymous. But the point here is that jihad is considered an obligation, and Islamic law recognizes two types of obligation, the individual obligation and the communal obligation. The individual obligation, or fard ain, is to wage defensive jihad against non-Muslim invaders. And no one is included from this, no one is excluded from this obligation. All must participate, including women and children. But with regards to communal obligation or fard kifaya, it is to wage offensive jihad against non-Muslims in their own respective lands in order to spread Islam. And it is to be conducted at least once a year with the imam or his representative. It's right in there. But it is not incumbent upon every individual. Only how many individuals as are necessary to have a successful campaign need to participate. Muslims may enter into peace treaties only when the Muslim community is weak. But now here is the kicker. Should Muslims have the upper hand, then Islamic law mandates that they must break the peace treaties and conquer the land. It's explicitly written in the text. If Muslims have the upper hand, meaning that they can wage a successful campaign to take over a land and establish Islamic law, they are legally obligated under Islamic law to do so. They cannot hide behind peace treaties. They must break the peace treaties. So peace treaties are basically used as a way to for the Muslim community to maybe avert aggression by the non-Muslims against the Muslims, stall for time, whatever it is. But there is no honesty at its core when Muslims engage in peace treaties. You need to know that by Islamic law, the Muslim is not engaging in a peace treaty in an honest way. He's only doing it because he can't conquer you. The moment that he can conquer you, then he has the obligation under Islamic law to do so. Now, this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about the historical example of Muhammad's own lifetime with regards to the so-called peaceful understanding of Islam. So you find it written in the Islamic law books, the way that they describe jihad, they do talk about it as evolving over multiple stages, specifically 4 stages. During the Meccan phase, Muslims coexisted peacefully alongside non-Muslims. Islam was preached in a non-hostile way. And this is jihad of the tongue, meaning to spread Islam through talking. While this manner of spreading Islam is part of jihad, it is restricted to the Meccan phase. Most importantly, however, is that the Meccan phase was when the Muslim community was weak and unable to impose Islam as the law of the land. This reflects Muhammad's initial ministry while in Mecca, where he knew that any overt offensive hostility would lead to severe backlash. Then came the Medinan phase, which consists of 3 subphases. The Medinan phase starts when Muhammad migrated to Medina to the north of Mecca in order to flee persecution by the Meccans. And this migration is known as the Hijrah. And it's this event that marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. In the first subphase, it was permissible for Muslims to fight, but only by those who were specifically being persecuted and only against those specifically persecuting them. In the second subphase, obligatory defensive fighting was instituted to all Muslims in order to protect the emerging and newly created Islamic State. In the third and final subphase, obligatory offensive fighting was instituted in order to spread Islam. Muhammad conquers Mecca, and the caliphs after him spread Islam across Arabia and North Africa using the sword. So now that Islam is established, it has a stronghold in Medina. The Medinan phase is in full force. Jihad is offensive and it's obligatory. Does Islam teach that it is a peaceful religion? Yes. when the Muslim community is in the Meccan phase. Does Islam teach that it is a violent religion? Yes, when the Muslim community is in the Medinan phase. Understanding Islam hinges on understanding the interplay between the various phases. And remember, Quran 33:21 says that Muslims are to emulate Muhammad's own historical circumstances. So when Muslims preach that Islam is a peaceful religion, what they are really telling you is we are currently in the Meccan phase of jihad against you. That's what it means when they're telling you that Islam is a peaceful religion, that they're too weak to impose Islam on you, that they're currently in the Meccan phase. These are not the opinions of some random scholars. These are the official, relied upon Muhammad positions and understandings of the recognized jurisprudential schools. There is no getting around the fact that violent, offensive jihad is authentic Islam. Overt, offensive, hostile jihad with the intent of global Islamization is the authentic expression of Islam legally mandated by Islamic law. Islamic law for an Islamic state. As a Muslim belonging to an Islamic state, you do not get to make up your own version of Islam. When you, as a Muslim, live in an Islamic state, you live according to Islamic law. It's not any different to how, when you live in whatever country in the world, you live according to the laws of that respective country. You don't get to make up your own law. Likewise, the Muslim nonsense lying about Islam is a so-called peaceful religion. Sure, Islam is peaceful when you're in the Meccan phase, and Islam is also peaceful when you're Muslim living in an Islamic state. But when you do not want to be Muslim, then you have no choice but to abide by Islamic law when living in an Islamic state. And jihad forcibly imposes Islamic society upon everyone. Upon reaching non-Islamic territory, the advancing Muslim army must first invite the non-Muslim inhabitants dwelling there to accept Islam. Should they reject Islam, then they are to be fought. And if they're idolaters, they're to be killed. But if they're what's known as the people of the book, the Ahl al-Kitab, meaning Christians and Jews, then they are to be subjugated. But subjugation, according to Islamic law, means that Muslims are to purposefully humiliate the Christians and Jews. It is not sufficient for the Ahl al-Kitab to merely pay the required jizya, but they must do so in a humiliating way. So when you hear Muslim apologists, they'll say, well, the Muslims, they have to pay zakat, so would they have to give obligatory charity? Well, the non-Muslims, they pay the jizya. It's just the exact same thing. No, it's not the exact same thing. The amount that Muslims will pay is much lower. The amount that non-Muslims pay the jizya is much higher. But more importantly, the payment is done in a humiliating way. And that's the point.
I want to remind everybody real quick, Kai, if you want to support the
Yeah.
stream, you can pay your jizya in the super chats by sending in super chats via Streamlabs. That Streamlabs link is pinned in the chat. You can also super chat natively through YouTube as well. Go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, so Islamic law is very clear on this point. The jizya that non-Muslims pay to the Islamic State, it's not about the money itself. And Islamic law is very clear. It's not about the money. It's about the paying of it done in a humiliating way, meaning in a way demonstrating that Muslims are superior. So it's an example of psychological warfare on non-Muslims. Jihad
That's a
establishes,
great point to keep that in mind, that it's not just getting, monetary advantage. It's psychological warfare and deracination.
yeah, yeah, and that's going to be very, very important with regard to the psychological warfare, especially the one book that I have there that I want to talk about at some point. It's The FBI Agent. He talks about the psychological profile of people who become jihadis and how basically they're psychologically manipulated into the jihadi cause of various groups, whether it's like ISIS, Al Qaeda, and everything. So Islam has within it built a lot of psychological warfare aspects to it. So jihad also establishes fundamental inequality between Muslims and non-Muslims. For example, in an Islamic state, it is not permissible for non-Muslims to be judges over Muslims or to give testimony against Muslims in a court of law. So your Muslim living in the non-Muslim country that tells you Islam is a peaceful religion, he has no other means but to submit to the law of the land that is now currently in effect, that is not Islamic. And if he was to now become in the majority and establish Islamic law, well, he's going to tell you, we don't have fundamental equality. You cannot be a judge. You cannot witness against me. So basically, it's my word against yours, and the Islamic court will always judge in my favor. It is not permitted for non-Muslims to carry weapons, and non-Muslims must wear distinct clothing to set them apart from Muslims. So these are just some of the things that I listed
Does that
that
distinct clothing allow you to have drip, or is that a no drip humiliation clothing?
no, you have to still abide by their customs. And you'll actually see in regions um, where Islam was historically prevalent, and that may not be prevalent today. Certain areas, like in Bosnia, for example, that has been under the influence of the Ottomans. So you will see a lot of distinct clothing that even Christians will wear, but that has very much Islamic influence. But it's not exactly the same. It's similar, but it's distinguished in such a way that sets them apart. So it's still abiding by Islamic norms, but it's just setting them apart so that any Muslim can look at that person and say, okay, we know that that is a Jew. We know that that is a Christian. We know that they're not Muslims. And this was mandatory. So the next time you hear a Muslim preacher say that Islam is a peaceful religion, ask him or her, is Islam an equitable religion? Does Islam consider the non-Muslim the same as the Muslim? Are you talking about Islam during the Meccan phase or the Medinan phase? And there are your sources right there. You can just throw that in their face when they lie to you. Islamic law is also very clear that jihad persists until the day of resurrection, Yom al Qiyamah. The Islamic mindset reflects a binary distribution of the world. Dar al Islam, meaning the region of Islam, the lands that are peaceful because they are under Islamic rule, and the Dar al Harb, the region of war, meaning the lands that need to be conquered and subjugated under Islamic rule through offensive jihad. So anyone who tells you that Islam is a peaceful religion or that jihad is just a private spiritual struggle, that you engage in the comfort of your own home, is lying to you, is ignorant, and or is delusional. so-called quote unquote moderate Islamic leaders denounce Muslims who engage in violent offensive jihad as extremists and tell us that they do not represent authentic Islam, that they hijacked Islam, that Islam is a peaceful religion. In reality, these so-called moderates are silently waging a stealthy jihad behind the scenes from within society. They are diverting your attention so you do not see the cultural violence they are waging. The moderates are not attempting to assimilate, but rather infiltrate and take over. Both the so-called moderates and extremists work together to bring about the same end result. When discussing jihad, it is inevitable to come across terms such as political Islam, radical Islam, fundamentalist Islam, extremist Islam, used by Muslims and non-Muslims alike. But the term political Islam is misleading because one may think that Islam can either be categorized so as to not consist of any political elements proper, or that Islam is a religion that can be politicized. In fact, Islam is at its very foundation political. There is no aspect of Islam that is not political.
This is important to note because many people in the West assume that these other people groups or these other religions have an enlightenment assumption like we do. This idea that there is a separation between the secular society and the religious elements, and that's not true. So, just like in the ancient and medieval world, Christianity believed that there was a governance of the state that applied to theology, that applied to the church. So both were in symphonia, but there is a duty that the state has to God. So it was theocratic. Modern post enlightenment, post scientific revolution, Western civilization has left the idea of theocracy or anything like the state having a duty to God. And now we're faced with a religion with a billion plus people that does believe in theocracy to some extent. And that's precisely why we have to understand that you can't have this idea that they're going to integrate, they're going to assimilate, they're going to uh, jibe with classical libertarian principles. It's preposterous.
Right, right. So, to give an example, so consider this. If you, as a Muslim, apostatize from Islam, then it is the obligation of the caliph or his deputy or his representative to execute you. Right here. If you, as a non-Muslim, are called to accept Islam and you refuse, then it is the caliph or his deputy who wages war on you and who can impose dhimitude on you, the head tax with corresponding societal subjugation, inferior social status, and explicit social stigmatization. But the caliphate is a religious political institution, and the caliph is a political figure exercising authority for a religious purpose, the dominance of Islam. It's a theocratic institution. And it is very important from the outset not to get caught up in the mindset that one can supposedly divorce Islam from politics. Any attempt to understand geopolitics in the Islamic world and among Muslims at large is to recognize that Islam is a religious system that at its core is inherently political. An extension to this central tenet are also the various connotations associated with the terms mentioned, radical, fundamentalist, extremist, as if to suggest that offensive jihad, especially through violent means, is not an authentic expression of Islam. This kind of thinking is contrary to historical Islam, both in the way it was practiced by Muhammad himself and as well by the succeeding generations of Muslims for the past 14 centuries. In reality, people who are deemed radical or fundamentalist or extremist, are in actuality observant Muslims. They are practicing Islam the way it is meant to be practiced. While the overwhelming vast majority of Muslims may confine their religious observances to things like praying, fasting, giving charity, and making the pilgrimage to Mecca, and are otherwise peaceful, the fact that the overwhelming majority do not practice offensive jihad, at least not in an overtly recognizable and physically violent manner, does not negate the validity and obligation to do so. All it means is that the overwhelming majority of Muslims feel that they are still in the Meccan phase, and the so-called extremists are jeopardizing their efforts by prematurely acting out in overt hostility as if they are in the Medinan phase. To help you better contextualize jihad, because at this point it's kind of been a little bit theoretical, just telling you really what jihad is about. Let's contextualize jihad by considering the following thought experiment. I call it the jihad thought experiment. So as I'm reading this, just kind of try to play it in your mind from the vantage point of the narrative. So a Muslim army is approaching to invade and conquer the non-Islamic territory in which you live. For whatever reason, you accept the invitation to Islam and become Muslim, thereby protecting your life once the Muslim conquest is achieved. However, your wife refuses to accept Islam and does not become Muslim with you. Not being knowledgeable in the details of Islamic law, you believe your non-Muslim wife is safe because she is your wife and you're now a Muslim. You might even think of her as your property. It is only after the Muslim conquest that you find out that, according to Islamic law, a wife does not automatically follow her husband into Islam. This means that she is part of the spoils of war, specifically under Fay. In other words, an invading Muslim may rightfully claim her for himself as war booty. Now, you, being a good Muslim convert, attend the compulsory Friday congregational prayer. To conclude the prayer, you turn your head to the side and say the compulsory Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you, to the Muslim who is now raping your wife. That is jihad. That is Islam. That is Islam. Fay booty stems from the Quran itself, and it conveys the general notion of restoration. Everything in the world is for the benefit of Muslims. And anyone who opposes this state of affairs is actually a usurper of the inherent rights of the Muslim community as a whole. Hence, transfer of things and persons to Muslims is restoration of the correct state of affairs. In other words, the Muslim community is to prosper at the expense of non-Muslims. And the transfer reflects this inherent Islamic world order. Let it be very clear. Islamic law does not require there to be compassion for the Muslim convert to retain his non-Muslim wife. Compassion is for the jihadi because Islam promises him non-Muslim women as war booty, even though the husband is a Muslim convert.
Let's read a couple super chats real quick here just to
Sure,
kind of catch up because there's quite a few that have kind of come in. So
sure.
40 Crush says for $5. Do you think the Injil could be the wisdom of Sirach mixed with Christ the teacher icon, a physical book written by a man named Jesus mixed with Jesus the Messiah? I don't think so. I think we kind of have a general outline of what Muhammad was influenced by from, people like St. John Damascus and others, that it's more so Nestorian ideology and Arian ideology, even according to the Oxford Handbook of Islam. So I don't really think there was a lot of influence from iconography, but there's also
Yeah.
elements that we don't know. Do you have any comments on that?
I would just say I think there's good reason to believe that the form of the Injil that the early Islamic community and Muhammad himself would have been aware of. It is possible that it might be the Diatessaron. So this was a version of the four gospels kind of put together as one gospel, taking the
Was that
narratives.
that was Tatian, was it?
I think so. Don't quote me on it. I
Okay,
don't
well, it was
remember.
one of, I think, one of the students of Justin Martyr, St. Justin Martyr, and these were the
Yeah.
Logos apologists. But I think, if I recall, the Diatessaron has like heterodox elements in it. I'm going from memory.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, I don't think the Diatessaron, even if that was what they understood to be the Injil, I don't think that was their only source of knowledge of Christianity. I mean, I think there's a very, very strong case um, to make that Muhammad was very much
Yeah,
influenced
it
by
was.
Ethiopians,
It
and
was.
so
Yeah, let me read this real quick. So it was the compilation by Tatian, who was an early Logos apologist. Tatian, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure fell into heresy, but this is the
yeah,
compilation around 175 AD, attempting to give a kind of an early gospel harmony, and it was
yeah,
created in the Syriac language.
yeah.
So, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So and then that's I think kind of the diatessaron, the fact that it was just one book gave the idea that the Injil is just one single book. So did you want to go into any more super chats? Do you have any more?
Yeah, we got some more. Let's see. Doth became a member. What's up, man? 40 Crush says, no, we did that one. Dan Dantella Bella, $50. Thank you so much. Have you noticed that a lot of the anti-Israeli right wingers become very pro-Islamic in their messaging? Yes, I've been talking about this for the last 2 or 3 years because
Yeah.
the Saudis and other people will fund and put money behind people on the right wing. So
Yeah.
you look at the Tates, they start pushing Islam. This happens after he meets with Saudi people. I don't know for sure, but I'm just speculating. You get these influencers like Lily J pushing Islam with just absolutely no knowledge of anything whatsoever, but she's a hot blonde, and so people follow it. So they're absolutely putting billions of dollars. Actually, the Saudis, according to Blumenthal's book, in the last 20 years, have put billions of dollars into building mosques and Islamic centers all throughout the United States. So yes, they are putting money into these right wing figures. You mentioned Tucker. I mean, I'm hoping to, hopefully we can sway Tucker in the right direction. He does have an interest in Orthodox Christianity. He's met with Father Peter Heers, and they've had some discussions. I know that Tucker has read some books that we recommended, like I know that he has in his possession some Father Seraphim Rose books. So um, I'm not so sure about the Qatari thing. It wasn't actually Qatar. It was an Iranian who ran that investment firm. It wasn't a Qatari or a Pakistani. Excuse me. It was a Iranian Pakistani guy who runs that, and that includes Jewish investors as well. It includes Donald Trump Jr. So the story about Tucker being funded by Qatar is not exactly accurate, but we definitely want to make sure that they don't. I mean, it was unfortunate the second half of Tucker's talk at the, what was it, CPAC or whatever, where it got into this sort of pro, well, if Bibi's bad, then Islam's got to be good. Okay, we got to be more sophisticated than this. This is just so low tier, basic dialectical manipulation. No, Christianity is the real enemy, and Islam and Judaism are both absolutely opposed. And by the way, Islam's origins are actually also very Talmudic, and people don't understand that. Do you have any comments on that?
About the Talmudic aspect, well, I mean,
Well,
that,
that and the false dialectic of, well, if these people who are anti-Israel, so
yeah,
therefore they must be
yeah.
good because they're Muslims.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've made multiple community posts on this false dialectic that it's like it's not like a good versus bad or like the lesser of two evils. This is just like evil on both sides. And as a Christian, you should not be supporting either of these two parties, either of these two sides. But that's something I think we can kind of unravel in a future stream because I specifically do want to talk about Israel and Hamas and the interplay there. I have one slide that I'm going to finish this presentation just talking specifically about that, but I think that would be a very more appropriate venue to talk about why it's a false dialectic.
Okay.
Um, yeah. The other one was what was the other? You had a comment.
I'm going to it. That was the essence of it. 40
yeah.
crush,
Okay.
$50 payday. I actually have some Bitcoin shekels. I'm too autistic and retorted to understand it. Well, you don't have to be some sort of tech dork genius to understand or be interested in Bitcoin. This is my Bitcoin wallet right here. If you want to support the show through Bitcoin, you can do it right there with that QR code. And you get started with Bitcoin in the show description with the Swan Bitcoin link. It is a Bitcoin only company. There's no other cryptos. There's no meme coins or whatever. It's Bitcoin only. Let's see. We got fish in a tie, $2. Muhammad was an Abyssinian bishop under King Abraha. Never heard that. So I don't know. Have you ever heard that? Sounds like a legend.
No, I just it's nonsense. I think he's just trying. He's connecting dots that don't exist.
Hold
Um,
on. There's a little more. Did you want to say something before I go on?
no, no, go ahead.
I'm not your buddy. $5. Unrelated. I was curious if you played any more of Alan Wake 2. I did. In fact, I got through the next part because I ended up getting into it and I didn't stream it. So, but I mean, there's more of it if you guys want me to do some more Alan Wake. He says it was surprisingly hilarious when you were doing it from the perspective of Candace Owens. I'm glad you thought it was funny. Carlos, $5. I'm paying my jizya. I think you and Raymond Ibrahim would be a great collaboration. He's written many books on these topics against Islam.
Yep. And Raymond Ibrahim, he actually did um, a few weeks ago, a month ago, very recently, he did a talk on trigonometry, talking about Islam, covering a lot of stuff that I'm talking about as well. He's taking it very much more heavily on the historical aspect, but I would highly recommend you guys to check out that interview.
And we got a super chat here from N Memone, $10. Here, have some jizya. Yeah, I get it. Good one. We got more. Let's see. Crusader, what's up? Can't remember. Fish. No. None of your business, $5. Liberals support Islam to be in the top 10%. This has to be in one of the top 10% most incoherent positions. It's even worse. No one should actually be supporting Islam. Well, there's many reasons why they do that. This is the Red
Yeah.
Green Alliance. The left supports it because there's the layer of the scams that we've seen coming out with the Somalis and these people in Minnesota. So there's a layer of scammery that goes on with stealing the money and bringing these people in, and you get a cut. There's the overall game plan of the replacement of Western peoples
Yep.
that is mentioned explicitly in the Kalergi plan.
Yep.
And then even more
I'm actually going
recent,
to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about that exactly.
even more recently, it's been restated with bankers like um, what was that guy's name? Summers, the European banker, that Islam will help to destroy the European civilization.
Yep.
General Wesley Clark even said it, that Europe would have to be destroyed through the migration techniques. All the Fabian socialists said that Islam would be the way to take down Europe to install something amenable to socialism. And most of the early Fabian socialists explicitly said, like Bertrand Russell, for example, Beatrice and Sidney Webb said that Islam would be the tool by which they would transition Europe into a socialist order, because they felt that Islam would be more amenable to transitioning to socialism than Christianity would be. They're very explicit about that. So there's
Yeah.
many statements about this from powerful Western elite peoples. This is also why the British Crown is so pro-Islam.
Yeah. And that's actually what I'm going to be getting into very like this kind of topic in just one more slide after this. Am I good to continue, Jay? Or do you have some
Well, we
more?
got some more. Let me get some more through some more of these. And
Okay.
guys, remember, I will donate to Kai as well, so you're not just giving jizya to me. It's also going to Lord Kai. Pano says $2. Did you read any of the prophecies yet of Elder Ephraim of Arizona? I have read some of them off and on over the years. I know there is some question as to how many are exactly authentic. And I do think it's interesting, but I don't have any hard set opinions on that. Kai, do you have any opinions on uh,
No, I don't have
Elder
anything.
Ephraim or any prophecies relating to Islam?
No, I haven't read anything about the prophecies, so I'm not going to comment on that.
And then we have Don says for $20. Sorry to digress. Agnostic here, but I'm a huge fan. Does Athanasius essays and John Damascus? I've done the Athanasius essays and I did John Damascus. I think this is the guy that called in the other day. Can you recommend a book to help me understand religious philosophy? Um, well, I mean, if I was an agnostic, I would start with something like Mind of God by Paul Davies. I mean, that's kind of about religious philosophy. You could get a book like Yaroslav Pelikan's book on metamorphosis of natural theology and the Cappadocians, Pelikan. That will give you a philosophy of the Cappadocians. But I can't think of a single religious philosophy book off the top of my hand that would be like a good introduction. But I'm glad that you found those books to be interesting. Oh, you already read Love. You said you read Mind of God. Okay. Yeah, it's hard to. I mean, well, actually, John Damascus has a book called Fount of Knowledge, and it's just laying out the philosophical terms that he uses. So that might be the closest thing to a patristic introduction to philosophy of religion. But that's all I could think of at the moment. Go ahead, Kai.
Yeah. All right, so I'm just going to finish up this slide here, and then I've got one more slide on the Islamic law stuff, and then we're going to change gears, and the next stuff is going to be a little bit more interesting. So just this whole concept of that type of war booty, um, and about taking the non-Muslim wife of the Muslim when the Muslims invade the land and conquer it. So it's also about teaching the Muslim convert a very important general Islamic lesson, and that is everything that is in the possession of non-Muslims must be transferred to Muslims. That is the will of Allah and the natural order of the world. And so the act of transference of one's wife teaches this very, very lesson. And with that, the new Muslim convert prepares to wage jihad against non-Muslims. And this is how Islam naturally grows its army, how it naturally sustains its growing army as it expands.
Well, this also explains the attitude of a lot of these people when they come into Western countries, and the people in the Western countries are mystified by the way that these people act.
Yes.
I'm speaking with like regard to grooming gangs and these kinds of things.
Yep. Yep. And it's not just grooming gangs. Like you have, it's no joke, those people who are from Germany, they can attest to this. Like, for example, you have signs at swimming pools, at public swimming pools, written in Arabic that are like literal illustrations that it's not okay for men to be walking into the female washrooms or to physically touch females unwanted and stuff like that. Like these people have to be taught these cultural norms. It's like they come into these societies with a completely different mindset as if everything belongs to them. It's for their taking. And that's what Islam fosters. It fosters this mentality. Non-Muslim things and people, whatever it is, it's there for your taking. It
Kai, I'm going to
belongs.
let you keep going. I'm going to run to the
Okay,
restroom real quick, and I'll be right back. You
okay.
can keep going.
All right, no problem. So the modern jihad playbook is to collapse everything and everyone critical of Islam and Muslims as Islamophobia. So basically, Islamophobia is the new sword for Muslims to wage jihad, or by which Muslims will wage jihad. When Muslims are militarily weak, then they wage what is called civilization jihad. They migrate to non-Islamic lands peacefully. They refuse to integrate into the target society, get into positions of power, reach critical mass and influence, and then take over, all while crying Islamophobia against everyone who dares say or do anything to inhibit them. In the event that Muslims will never be an external military threat, they bank on the prospect that the host country is unable to deal with them as an internal threat. No one cares about being labeled Islamophobic. That is a worn out, nonsensical mantra that no one takes seriously. Everybody sees what Islamic communities are doing, and they're calling bullshit on Islamophobia. They don't want to live in Islamic style communities. They don't want to be under Sharia. They don't want an Islamic state. Islam, inherently at its very core, mandates the establishment of an Islamic state. So it's not Islamophobia, it's rejection of Islam. People see through the bullshit. Now I'm going to switch gears. So, from the perspective of Muslims,
Before we do
Islam.
that, hold on. We got some more
Okay.
super chats that have come
You
in.
want to get some more super chats? All right.
Jaya Al Dyer, $2. Can you or Kai mention Quran 9:30, where Muhammad says Jews say that Ezra is the son of Allah, and this is akin to Christians saying this about Christ to justify fighting them? Where did Muhammad get this idea? Well, when I did the debate with Hakikachu, we covered Gabriel Said Reynolds' book, which covers many of the fundamental mistakes that are made in the Quran. And I would say that this is probably one of those where there was some misunderstanding that, because remember, Muhammad is illiterate. So he's hearing this stuff and coming to his own bizarre conclusions about who Ezra is or what Christians believe. And one of the first videos Kai made was, for example, Islam's fundamental misunderstanding of the Trinity, the deity of Christ, and Mary. So it's riddled with all kinds of basic mix-ups, and that's why the religion is so ridiculous. Is that it's usually going back in a revisionist way to try to make sense of and sort of create a new story that makes all this stuff work together. So could you comment on that, Kai?
Yeah, I mean, just I myself, I don't know where exactly they got this idea that Ezra is the son of God. No clue. That is just one oddity that I haven't come across any good explanation other than the assertion.
Well, I mean, and it shows like just fundamental mistakes
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
Quran.
Oh, yeah. And but just to comment, like just in general, like one of the things that I've done, I've made several community posts on this, and I've made some videos as well, where when you look at the earliest Islamic commentators, they're all just kind of baffled to explain Christian doctrine, and so then you just see them like literally. Inventing beliefs that Christians didn't have. And it's funny because when you read the commentators, they're like trying to be um, understanding of the different Christian sects that exists. Like they will identify the Melkites being the Orthodox, they'll call them the Jacobites being the Monophysites. They identify the Nestorians, and they name these groups by name. And they're saying, oh, this group believes this group believes that, whatever. And it's just the absolute nonsense. Like they clearly don't understand what any of these groups believe in,
Yeah.
what differentiates the two groups. So if the commentators themselves are having difficulty in making so many ridiculous blunders, then it's no wonder that Muhammad himself blundered just whatever stories he would hear.
Yeah, and people should understand too, like, this is really important information. I hope you guys understand. This is really like a college or a graduate school introductory lecture to Islam and geopolitics. And, you don't get this in the West. In American education and the university system, for example, I had a college undergraduate history class on the history of Islam, and it was all just like selling it. It was promoting it, and you don't get this kind of an unfiltered, Kai level approach. So I hope you guys appreciate this, and you're getting real information. While we at least have some of the freedom here on YouTube to be able to do it. So if you guys
Yeah.
want to, please support the stream, and I will also be supporting Kai as well with this. None of your business, $10. Basically, when an Islamist says that Islam is peaceful, what they're really saying is this is a Jedi mind trick. These aren't the Islamic laws you're looking for. Correct. To quote
Yep.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, that is absolutely correct.
Yep. Yep.
Nemo Meme One says for $10, the left that is pro-Islamic, especially these girls, should read the book Camp of the Saints. It will not go well for them. Yeah, it's funny you said that because I wasn't really aware of this book until I think Sneck mentioned it one day, and I was like, "That's interesting. What is that book?" And I think it predicts the sort of destruction of Europe, doesn't it, through Islam and these kinds of things. Kai, do you know?
No, I haven't come across that book. So that might.
It's a kind of a well-known fiction book, and it's like a dystopia, I think. I haven't read it, but I remember Sneck talking about it, and it talks about let's see what it says. Controversial 1973 French dystopian novel where the collapse of the West happens through Islamic migration. Wow. So here you have a 1973 fiction novel predicting it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Go ahead.
Yep. All right. So now we're going to switch gears. And so the first part of the presentation, it was from the perspective of Muslims, Islam teaching them to wage jihad, and that Muslims have a religious obligation to dominate the world. From the perspective of the New World Order, and I'm just kind of using that as a catch-all phrase.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to bitch for a second here, not at you, but so again, to people in the chat, when you come with this low tier bullcrap that you're pro Zionist because you're not uh, calling out, that's not true. You can find countless critiques of Zionism, rabbinic Judaism on my channel. So if you come with these lies, I'm immediately blocking you. Go ahead.
Yep. Yep. So, yeah, the New World Order, I'm just using it as a catch-all phrase. That's a phrase that's been around for a very, very long time. It just basically like meaning like those people and elements who have the financial means, influence, and power to affect global geopolitics. Okay. For the New World Order, the Muslims are to be exploited for their nefarious purposes, manipulating them like pawns on a global chessboard. So now we're going to start unraveling how in the world can you get people at this global level who have this influence, who are clearly themselves not Muslims, wanting to support Muslims and the establishment of Islam? Like, how can you reconcile all this? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to start unraveling all of this.
So again, I cannot fathom how stupid some of these people in the chat are. Just do not even
Right.
come here. I literally just told you that I critique Zionism and Islam and Judaism, and they're both enemies of Christianity. I literally said it like an hour ago,
Yeah.
And you're literally in the chat calling me a Zionist. Jay Yosemite is a Zionist. I will
Yeah,
kick.
I have.
All of you are going to get booted right away if you say this
Yeah.
stupid shit over and over and over. I'm sick of it.
Yeah, yeah, you just have to even go onto my community posts. I've written very clearly of what is the problem with Zionism, that this is not something that we support. As an Orthodox Christian, you should not be supporting Zionism. I'm very clear on this, and I'm trying to hammer home the point that don't fall into this false dialectic. Don't think that because we're criticizing Islam that we're now supporting Zionism, or that if we're
Oh, so
criticizing
basically, you're saying that you love Netanyahu. That's all. Your
yes,
Sky is getting 7,000 BB bucks for making this lecture here. That's it. That's
right,
what's going on.
right,
And well, also, by the way, so basically, you don't like Sneeko because you love BB.
right.
That's your only options. You either love Sneeko or you're with Netanyahu.
Yeah, it's just low tier garbage. So the non-Islamic New World Order remarkably aligns with a lot of core Islamic elements that devalues life and is destructive to the family unit. Okay, so the kind of societal degradation that the New World Order pushes, especially in advanced societies, is endorsed by Islam, as ironic as that may sound. For example, consider the following elements that are destructive to the family unit and that devalue life in Islam, and you will see them being embraced by the New World Order. So, first, abortion. So, according to the prevalent opinion of the Hanafi school, abortion is permitted within the first 120 days after conception, since the fetus does not have a soul during this period. Now, other opinions, other schools, they may say, well, the time frame is 40 days, or it might be whatever it is. They put some other number, but let's just take 120 days as kind of like the maximal period, if you will. And since the death of a person is the separation of soul from body, and there is no soul at this point, meaning there is no person, then there is no death of a person. Okay, so this is very important. You see, in the degenerate mindset in the West that promotes abortion, there is this reluctancy to identify the fetus as a person, as a human being. And Islam aligns with that mentality. It goes hand in hand. Divorce, marriage in Islam is just a contract that can be very easily dissolved. There's no sanctity or holiness to marriage. I remember even reading in one of the Islamic law books, it's basically saying, it's just very blunt, is the saying is that marriage is what makes um, sexual intercourse licit. That's basically the whole reason for marriage. But obviously, marriage has other kinds of responsibilities as well. Promiscuity. Now, among the Shia, there is muta, and among the Sunnis, there is misyar.
You son of the
Basically,
devil, you are committing, your mother is committing muta with the Shia, and that's how you got here, you son of the devil. I just had to do a little scam. I had to do a little scam shamu interlude here when you said muta.
that was perfect, right on point. Yeah, that was great. But basically, the idea here is both camps, Shia and Sunni, they have fake marriages for the sakes of sex with minimal to no commitments. Now, a lot of people will be familiar with muta from the Shia side, and muta is something that was explicitly allowed.
Look at Kai manifesting. Look at the demons manifesting in Kai right now. Wow, these
I'm manifesting,
the
yes.
orbs are manifesting.
The orbs, yes. Um, so yes, so muta. was practiced during the time of Muhammad. The Sunnis will say that it was annulled. The Shia will say, no, it was never annulled. It is still valid, and they will practice it to today. But the Sunnis, they want to get the benefits that the Shia have, so they just do a lot of mental gymnastics and they will call it misyar. And so you guys can look that up and you can read up about it. But it's basically just fake marriages so that you can have sex with no commitments. Polygyny. So Muslim men are permitted up to four wives and as many concubines as he wants. Islamic law forbids the wives to cohabit together. This is a very important point. So, under Islamic law, a Muslim man who has four wives, those four wives are legally mandated that they must not live together in the same roof. They can be on the same property, but they cannot be living under the same roof. And what's the reason given? So that their menstrual cycles do not align. This is so that the husband can have sex whenever he so desires. So there you see this prevalence of giving to sexual desires, sexual pleasures in Islam, as you see in the West, where everything is so hypersexualized. Some other examples, pedophilia. So we see that
Now
in the
remember,
West.
Kai, we are on YouTube, so be let's try to use terminology that won't, because the problem is that the algorithm will just sort of bury it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
let's say things like PDF or
Okay. PDF. Okay.
and then
Sorry about that.
unalived and TRANZ, right?
Okay. All right. I'll do my
Yeah,
best,
just
Jay.
PDF is right, because
Okay.
again, it's
Okay.
all
So
algorithmic, and we don't want the stream to just die as soon as it's done. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It'll get
Yeah.
demonetized as well. So just try to use the terms.
Okay. All right. So maybe I can just kind of summarize it. So you guys can see the slides, what's written up there. And so the idea here, and I've done the videos on this where the um I don't even know what words I can use, Jay. I don't want to
Here,
do
let me
any.
summarize it. So according
Sure.
to Islamic law, you have in the first situation of PDF, it is permissible to have marriage with, what is it, 9 and under with Aisha, right? Is that the age, or is it even younger? Is
No,
there
no,
an
no. It's even younger.
Okay, so it's
There
even
is
younger. There's no stipulated age. We'll stop there because the other parts we can't really talk about.
right.
TRANZ, everybody should know that this is very promoted. In fact, Iran is one of the world hubs of this reassignment surgery. And then in the case of unaliving, it is permissible in the situations of war. And thus you get the unaliving BOMB people. So is that sufficient to cover kind of what's on the screen?
Yeah, that's fine. And the slide is up there so people can read it to fill in the details of that. But I do apologize that I did say the one word. I don't
It's
know if you want
okay.
to go
It's just
back.
we want it to stay in the algorithm is all.
Yeah, I get it. But basically, the whole point here is I'm giving you examples that shows how the New World Order is systematically breaking down the nuclear family unit and aiding
This is a
Muslims.
great tool for it.
Yeah, aiding Muslims. This is the tool to globally dominate traditionally powerful countries
Now, yeah,
in
and
this effort.
like Rachel said, what are we all being fed? Oh, Islam is based, it's trad, it's right wing. That's all of these idiot mouthpieces out there that everybody's listening to, like Sneeko and Tates. They're all buying into this idea. Oh, Islam's trad and no, it's not. As you can see, this is what it really is.
Yeah, yeah. Now. This is going to
By the
be,
way, as somebody also pointed out, Kai, isn't it also the case that cousin marriage is allowable as well, which leads to the inbred low IQ
okay.
stuff?
Welcome to the new slide. Welcome to this next slide. That's
Okay, there we
exactly
go.
what I'm talking about. And Andrew Wilson, I think, will appreciate this slide, given his debate with Hakikachu on the topic. So the thing here is that Muslims are easy to manipulate and control, like globally, like from the powers. Islam fosters stupidity and inbreeding, and Muslim majority countries consistently rank the highest worldwide for consanguineous marriage per capita. So I've listed some countries there with their percentages. I've given you the link. You can go and see other countries in comparison. But you have at the top of the list Pakistan, 61%. So that means 61% of the Pakistanis who are married are likely cousins. 61%. And you look at the other countries, 54%, 51%, 50%. So chances are quite high that a person who comes from a Muslim background, like a native Muslim background, that their parents are probably cousins. And chances are that they'll probably marry a cousin as well. And this is very significant because inbreeding correlates to lower intelligence. There's proof for this. And this is an article that appears in Nature. And I'll just quote you what the findings are. He says, I have now examined the effects of inbreeding on cognitive performance in an Arab population with a high rate of consanguineous marriage, which minimize the distortions due to non-genetic variables. I show here that offspring of unrelated parents performed better than offspring of first cousin marriages in intelligence and achievement tests administered at grades 4 and 6. The lowest level of performance and a higher variance were found for offspring of double cousin marriages. The inbreeding depression found in this study is consistent and cannot be explained by the effects of socioeconomic status. End quote. Basically, when the entire world is stupid and inbred, then it is easier to control and
Yeah,
eliminate.
amen. Exactly. So it's a perfect religion for the globalists.
Yep. So now let's see what Muslims themselves say. So, cousin marriage is not only permitted in Islam, but it is encouraged. Sheikh Ibn Baz was asked, I read something that said, marry non relatives lest you have unhealthy children. Is it a Sahih hadith? He replied, this has no basis. Rather, it is better to marry relatives, as the Prophet gave his daughters in marriage to some of his relatives. As for the view of some jurists, there is no basis for it. Rather, it is optional. If a man wants to marry relatives, such as his paternal cousin or maternal cousin, or if he wants to marry a non relative, there is nothing wrong with that. As for the view of those who say that marriage to a non relative will produce more intelligent children and is better, there is no basis for that and no evidence to support it. If there is a relative who is good, it is more appropriate to marry her, and a marriage to her may be regarded as upholding ties of kinship. But if there's a non relative who is better looking and better in character, then marrying a non relative is better. In other
I
words,
can attest to all this IQ stuff being true from my own personal experiences of 7 years of debating the Muslims now, and the inability, for example, for any of them to restate what a hypothetical is. Feel free to go ahead, Kai.
sorry.
Oh, you're laughing. I was like, did he?
No,
Did
I'm
he?
just laughing. It's just so true, Jay. It's just so
Do you
true.
remember that there was a 6 hour live stream where we had all of these Muslims for 6 hours straight, and there was not one who could restate just simply what the argument was. Not do you believe
Right.
it? They couldn't even think about it like, but I don't believe that. I know you don't believe that, but can you just restate what the argument is? I don't believe that.
Yeah, Zakir Naik. Um, But in other words, so Muslims are taught from Muslims themselves. So this is not like us projecting. This is Muslims themselves teaching other Muslims that there is no connection whatsoever with inbreeding and intelligence and encouraging people to marry their cousins. It's like they say it's a good thing. Look at look at our prophet. We're supposed to emulate our prophet. We're supposed to do what Muhammad did. And he engaged in cousin marriages. He allowed that. He encouraged that. I mean, this is the mentality that you're dealing with. These are the people that you're dealing with. This is the result of this generational inbreeding that you're dealing with when you're dealing with Muslim dawah, when you're dealing with dawagandists, when you're dealing with these Muslim preachers. This is what you're dealing with. So this goes hand in hand with the so-called birth gap problem, fueled by the breaking down of the nuclear family unit, which is leading to global depopulation. So this is really important. The global population is set to significantly decline in the coming decades, including in Western countries. This is due to people delaying reproducing until later in life, typically due to emphasizing personal career development, but also due to socioeconomic difficulties to raise a family earlier and the societal degeneration and eroding of traditional values. So the breakdown of the family unit. The number of younger people in the workforce is proportionally decreasing compared to the aging population. This has serious consequences as there are fewer younger people to economically support an increasing aging
Let me
population.
ask you a question here, Kai. We have some
Yeah.
questions in the chat, which could be worth responding to. How would you respond to somebody who says, "Well, but wait a minute, how come the Ottomans were able to build an empire and they weren't all, married to cousins and they had some, successes with a civilization?" How would you respond to that?
So the Ottomans were nominally Muslims. Um, not
This is why other Muslims went to war against them.
Yes, and Muslims may not even be aware of this, or maybe they are, I don't know, that of the Ottoman sultans, not a single sultan in the entire history of the Ottoman Empire, to my knowledge, or to my recollection of reading the sources, not a single sultan ever made Hajj to Mecca. Not a single one of them.
Well, and they also kind of have how can we put this brigades of young men too.
What do you mean brigades of? Oh, yes, yes, yes,
So
yes.
in other words,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like
No,
they
we
weren't
don't
very
use
they
the.
were not very serious about their in other words, I think
No,
for the sultans, Islam was just a political
yeah.
tool.
Yeah, it was a political tool, and it was a tool that they themselves, I mean,
Butt buddies, that's the word I'm looking for.
yeah, they could use the populace, like Islam as a tool to manipulate the populace. They could try to frame certain issues as being Islamically valid. Like one of the ones, and I did a video on this, fratricide. So when when the father dies, which of the sons would become the new sultan. And so then you would have the one son like killing off all of his brothers. And so now the idea was, well, how do we justify this under Islamic law? And so it's more of kind of like looking for the resolution to the problem um, at hand and kind of like doing a lot of mental gymnastics to justify it. But you look at the Ottomans, um, they themselves were not really Muslims at
No,
heart.
so all right, let's be clear here. So people are saying, well, now wait a minute. Previous popes, medieval popes, etc., they didn't think that they were nominal. You're missing the point. It doesn't mean that the Ottomans didn't go to war and use Islam as a tool. It means
Right,
that they were not serious about it in the way that Salafi Sunni Islam considers you have
right,
to take Islam. This is
right,
why
right.
Sunnis have fought against Ottomans. So stop being so low IQ in the
Yes.
chat.
Yeah. The Ottomans, they used Islam like the okay, let's say the general population of Turks under the Ottoman Empire, they would be, let's say, very devout and religious. We're talking about the caliphs, we're talking about the sultans, we're talking about the leaders, these people who were leading the state, who were governing the state. They themselves were just using Islam as a political tool rather than having like this personal conviction that they were like these devout Muslims. Okay, they would drink alcohol. They would do a
They
lot of the
had pleasure boys. Again, this was the point I'm
yeah
making is that the sultans are not taking this seriously.
yeah.
We're not talking
Um,
about the people living in the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, but I didn't put Turkey on the list, but Turkey is also, I think 20 some percent in Turkey are inbred, would fall under the statistics. So it's not like that they're not negligible. They have a presence. They're just not as highly prominent as the other nations. Um, yeah, I mean they expanded the Ottoman empires. They did a lot of integration of lands that they conquered. They had a lot of people that they captured, sent back to Turkey, to the in the heartlands of Ottoman Empire, and that they were basically having a little bit more genetic diversity than some of the more isolated regions and smaller places. But did you want to read any more questions, or can I continue?
Yeah, so we got a couple of super chats. Thorin, Thorn Shield, $5. Please read Genesis 16:12. It's where it says that Ishmael will be like a wild man. Does that not accurately describe Muslims? Hey, remember a new Mecca was in Chronicles of Riddick. Was this subliminal? I don't know. I don't know if I've ever even seen Riddick, so I can't speak to that. But um, I definitely think that there's some reason why I don't remember why Scam Shamu thinks that Genesis 16 and Hagar and Ishmael isn't talking about Islam. I think it's because it's referring to Arab peoples, but there could still be some future sort of implicit reference to Islam within Genesis 16. I mean, it could go either way, but I do think that it describes the warlike attitude of Ishmael and his descendants, obviously. So I do think Genesis 16:12 is describing the tendencies of the Arab peoples to be against everyone and to be so warlike. What do you think, Kai?
Yeah, I don't really have any strong opinions on this. I think there is at one point in the Old Testament or New Testament, I don't remember where, that I think the Ishmaelites are distinguished from the Arabs. So it's not a one-to-one identity explicitly, but I mean,
Well,
whatever,
I mean,
like,
they're called, though, in our tradition, the Hagarenes. The Orthodox tradition
yes,
is oftentimes called these people the Hagarenes, which would be the
yeah,
descendants of Hagar. So there's some
yeah.
connection there.
Well, I mean, I myself wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say that we can call them the Hagarenes as a term that they themselves identify where they come from. So just for the sake of simplicity, we just grant it to them, not necessarily that we can agree with it. I mean, even within Muslim sources themselves, they cannot trace Muhammad's lineage to Hagar, to Ishmael. They can't. They cannot trace it. And I think there were hadiths that say, do not trace the lineage further than such and such person or whatever. But it's that claim that Muhammad descends from Ishmael, or from Hagar, if you will, is just a legend. Even within Islamic sources, it's a
Hmm.
legend.
Well, if you look up Hagarenes, it says that it's an old Syriac term used early on in Coptic, Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, and Armenian sources to describe their Arab conquerors throughout Mesopotamia, Syria, and Egypt.
Yeah,
It was used early
yeah,
on in Christian Byzantine literature to describe Hanifs or Arabs, and later Islamic sources
yeah,
use it as a term that is synonymous with the Christian term Saracen.
yeah.
So, anyway, I'm just giving the history. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah, no problem. Like, I mean, this is one thing. It's like, I'm okay to accept it either
But
which way it
I
goes.
mean, how isn't it also constantly called in the literature the Ishmaelites? But in other words, it's a term, but the term might be inaccurate. Is that what you're saying?
That's basically what I'm saying. It's like it's a term that's used, but that the accuracy of that term is left to speculation. It's more of an assertion than anything else. But like, I mean,
Okay.
for me, it's not really a question that really like.
All right, Snaggleby's $5. He says, God bless Jay. I was received in the Orthodox Church. Thank you for all your dismantling of my Protestant ideas and for all the awesome book recommendations. Thank you. Appreciate that. You can also get my books, by the way, in the shop at Jay's Analysis. I have 3 books on Hollywood. Esther Hollywood 3 just came out. Get signed copies in the shop. I also have my red book on theology, geopolitics, critiquing Rome, critiquing Protestantism. Pork stuff, $20. Excellent stream, guys. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate that. Remember, you can support the stream through Super Chats, through Streamlabs, or natively through YouTube. I will also be supporting Kai as well through your Super Chats. A2A says for $5, thank you for everything that you do. Thank you. Adrian Scarrow says for $10, maximum IQ has to be 65 of these people. Well, I guess you can debate what the maximum is, but it's not up there. I'll tell you that. It's yeah. Go ahead, Kai.
All right, good to go. All right. So just to continue this slide here, a few more points. So you no longer have as many younger people to economically support an increasing population with regards to the birth gap problem. But alongside this is that Muslims will outpace non-Muslim birth gaps. So as the European population is set to decrease, the ratio of Muslims to non-Muslims is set to increase. And so this is the perfect scenario for the New World Order to flood Muslims into Europe. And essentially, Europeans delay having their own children in order to financially support Muslim migrants to an existing parasitical life on welfare. But once Muslims have a dominant global presence, the same New World Order will curb that Muslim dominance given the Islamic prevalence for stupidity and generational inbreeding. So the ambitions of the New World Order align with the Islamic aspiration for global dominance for the time being. And this is precisely why those of the New World Order want to flood and overwhelm Europe and other places with Muslim migrants, knowing that they will generally not be productive members of society. And I'm going to get into my presentation later on, and you're going to see the numbers and what other countries are doing. Instead, these migrants will be a burden to their host countries
Kai,
economically.
I don't mean to be complaining or anything, but we're getting up into almost 3 hours. How long? How much longer do you have anticipated for this one?
Um, I was just gonna keep talking for
No, no,
however
I'm
long.
not trying to cut you off. I'm just asking
Yeah,
what your
I don't
estimate
know.
is.
Yeah, maybe I would say another hour.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah. So these migrants. they're going to be a burden to their host countries economically, societally, and culturally. But so to put it another way, the New World Order is actively helping Muslims who are in the minority transition from the Meccan phase to the Medinan phase. There's no interest for the New World Order to help Muslims build or rebuild their native countries. Rather, there is an active global exportation of Islamic destruction by Muslims as a hive minded horde to just devour and consume everything. Ask yourself the question, why do Muslims from Muslim majority countries all want to go to Europe? You could throw in North America or whatever, but just for the purposes, for the sake of a shorter journey, let's say they're all wanting to go to Europe. The answer is quite simple because Europe is better. But some European countries are starting to push back. Many Europeans have a sense of self-preservation. And despite facing their own internal problems of societal degeneration and eroding of traditional values, there is a strong sense of national identity and culture among many Europeans. Consider Denmark, for example. Denmark place Denmark places ads in Middle Eastern newspapers warning migrants not to come. These ads tell people that Denmark will not give them welfare benefits the same as what native Danes are entitled to receive, that family reunification is restricted. For example, the banning of spouses under 24 years of age, requiring heavy deposits and lengthening wait times, and that Danish is the language to be spoken in Denmark. Denmark has zero asylum policies. So-called refugees are viewed as temporary guests with no path towards residency. Remigration will happen. All asylum claims will be handled and processed in a different country. In other words, don't show up in Denmark and expect to file an asylum claim there. There are very strict immigration laws. Only people who can actually contribute positively to Danish society are selectively screened. Should anyone be allowed entry into Denmark, then Denmark reserves the right that their jewelry and cash be seized, and that is going to go towards financially supporting their stay in Denmark. Now, this next point here is very important. Denmark, along with Sweden and Norway, has banned cousin marriages. So family reunification of cousins is now impossible on the grounds of marriage. This law especially contradicts Islam. In other words, Scandinavia is telling the entire Muslim world that Islam is not the law of the land and never will be. Everyone in Denmark must integrate into Danish society or face consequences. Neighborhoods are physically demolished in order to eliminate ghettos. Foreigners are then reassigned to new housing locations in order to better foster integration efforts. And anyone refusing to abide by the mandatory relocation assignment will lose government financial assistance. Foreign parents will lose government financial assistance if they do not speak Danish with their children at home. and the children of foreigners are routinely assessed on their Danish proficiency. And Denmark also has compulsory integration programs. In Norway, the FRP is on the rise. This is the most right-wing party in Norwegian politics, expected to become the majority in the next election. The leader of the party, Sylvi Listhaug, recently made a post that reveals some very disturbing statistics about immigrants. In Norway, immigrants receive a staggering 74% of all social assistance. Let me rephrase that so that people don't misunderstand what I just said. It is not the case that 74% of immigrants in Norway are on social assistance. Rather, of all the people in Norway that receive social assistance, 74% are immigrants. Norway is not anti-immigration. Rather, the problem is with immigrants who burden the rest of society because they do not integrate and do not work. And part of the social assistance problem is due to chain immigration. One migrant makes it into Norway and then brings his entire family through chain immigration, who more likely than not will live on welfare. In Scandinavia, there is something very interesting called Janteloven. And this is a set of 10 principles that aim to preserve Scandinavian culture and a cohesive egalitarian society. However, Islam teaches that Muslims are superior to non-Muslims, the kuffar. You as a Muslim are not to integrate. So Scandinavian values are fundamentally incompatible with Islam. The 10 principles of Janteloven are: you are not to think you are anything special. You are not to think you are as good as we are. You are not to think you are smarter than we are. You are not to imagine yourself better than we are. You are not to think you know more than we do. You are not to think you are more important than we are. You are not to think you are good at anything. You are not to laugh at us. You are not to think anyone cares about you. You are not to think you can teach us anything. In other words, Islam is not compatible with Scandinavian society, as it fundamentally contradicts Scandinavian culture and a cohesive egalitarian society. Consider Poland. In 2024, Poland signs into law the authorized use of lethal force against anyone crossing the border into Poland illegally, i.e., migrants flooding into Europe. And you can go to, I provided the link there, the official presidential website. President Duda stressed that undoubtedly the growing terror wave is connected with migration. There is evidence, so rather no one in Europe can have doubts. In other words, if you as a migrant try to cross the border illegally into Poland, then you will be unalived. That is legally what Poland has stipulated. Consider Hungary. The Hungarian president, Viktor Orban, has said the main task of his new government will be to preserve Hungary's security and Christian culture. The hardline right-winger was re-elected for a third successive term as prime minister in April. I think the article was written in 2018, so April 2018, after a strong anti-immigration message secured a landslide victory. We are working on building an old school Christian democracy rooted in European traditions. We believe in the importance of the nation, and in Hungary, we do not want to yield ground to any supranational business or political empire, he said. Orban has accused non-governmental organizations funded by the Hungarian-born billionaire George Soros of political meddling and actively supporting immigration. So Soros would be an element within this new world order who is very much supportive of flooding Europe with migrants, but not just migrants, migrants specifically from Muslim majority countries. He wants to flood Europe with Muslims. Furthermore, I can only speak for the Hungarian people, and they don't want any migration, Orban said. In my understanding, it's not possible for the people to have a will on a fundamental issue and for the government not to comply with it. As such, they shouldn't be considered refugees so much as Muslim invaders, he said. In keeping refugees out of Hungary, Orban asserted he is merely following the will of his people, an indirect dig at Chancellor Angela Merkel, whose open door refugee policy has come under fire in Germany. And the difference between Germany and Hungary's respective handling of the refugee crisis is that Germany wanted migrants and we, meaning Hungary, didn't. All cultures are not equal. This is not just some anti-Islam rhetoric. While Europeans may believe that European culture is superior to Islamic culture, Islam itself teaches that not all cultures are equal. Islam teaches that Islamic culture is superior to all other cultures. So the feeling is mutual. Furthermore, migrants from other parts of the world, especially those from Muslim majority countries, do not think or behave like you. Muslims have no problem putting a knife to a baby's head in order to draw blood as an act of mourning for Hussein. These are the types of people you get when you have open door migration. Now, Sunnis may say that this is what the Shia do. Non-Muslims don't care about the differences between Sunni and Shia. That's an internal dispute. It's similar to how being an Orthodox or Roman Catholic makes no difference to the subjugated status in an Islamic state. According to Islam, a Christian is a Christian. There's no Orthodox or Roman Catholic or whatever. That's an internal dispute. Muslims as a collective refuse to integrate into other cultures. Compulsory integration programs may work on some individuals, but it will not overturn Islamic culture. There's a difference between teaching someone civility versus whole-scale importation of barbarism. Denmark, Hungary, Poland are Denmark, Hungary, Poland precisely because they are not Syria, Somalia, or Saudi Arabia. Muslims are proud of their native heritage and culture. Syrians are proud to be Syrians. Somalis are proud to be Somalis. Saudi Arabians are proud to be Saudi Arabians. Those who are Danish, be proud to be Danish. Be proud to embrace and preserve your Danish identity and culture. Likewise, Polish, be proud to be Polish. Preserve your Polish identity and culture. And Hungarians likewise. If you, as a non-Muslim European, do not embrace and preserve your national identity and culture, then you will be replaced with Muslims and Islam. That is the trajectory. Europe is at a crossroads and needs to realize before it is too late that jihad is being waged by the Muslims and the New World Order. So I'm going to end the presentation there properly for part one, but I'm just going to give a couple more slides as a kind of preview of the kind of discussions that we're now going to kind of venture off into future streams as we now start looking at the various geopolitical interactions with different nation states, with different groups, with different agencies. So everyone has being immersed in the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. But we're going to frame the issue a bit differently. Everyone knows the mantra, Israel has a right to defend itself. Okay, we hear that all the time. Israel has a right to defend itself. In the conflict with Hamas, Israel is defending itself against Islamic Jihad. After all, Hamas's own official publications state things like Hamas being an Islamic resistance movement. So it's not just a national movement, it's an Islamic resistance movement, and that Jerusalem and its Islamic and Christian holy places belong exclusively to the Palestinian people and to the Arab and Islamic Ummah. So while Hamas is a national Palestinian movement, it is also an Islamic movement, Islamic. Hence, any hostility that Hamas engages in is inherently to further the cause of Islam. In other words, Hamas wages jihad. Now, Hamas will say that it wages defensive jihad against Israeli aggression, but when Israel casts the conflict as Israel defending itself, then de facto they are saying that Hamas is waging offensive jihad. But what many people may not know is that Israel was actually involved in creating Hamas. And this is an important point often left out, especially by mainstream media when discussing the Israel-Hamas conflict. Now,
Just
you
as
might
a
be
side
wondering,
note, I mean, I'm
yeah,
not trying to cut you off. I mean, it
no,
is a
fine.
topic that we have covered probably 30 times on my channel in the last 2 years.
Yes,
Multiple fourth hours have gone into great detail about this. I'm not disputing or disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, hopefully,
yeah,
most people in this audience will be familiar with this. And
yeah,
by the way, this was also all the way up into recent times. Netanyahu was still supporting this approach, giving them aid. It was in multiple Israeli newspapers that this was still going on in recent years. So this is not some that's decades ago. No, it's been fairly recent.
yeah,
This is why there's been such a stir amongst Israeli debate and politics over this topic. So this is
yeah,
not a conspiracy theory. This is just basic history. Even the Mossad book by Viktor Ostrovsky discusses this, and not it's not just Hamas; it's also Muslim Brotherhood. Ostrovsky has a whole
yeah,
section talking
yeah,
about that.
yeah, exactly. Like we're going to unfold all of this. I'm just kind of giving a preview of the kind of analysis that we're going to provide. And so the thing here is, you might be wondering, why in the world would Israel want to create Hamas, an overtly Islamic movement bent on jihad? So it's not like Israel didn't know that Hamas, when they were creating it, that it was, or helping create it, that it was Islamic in motivation and that they wanted an Islamic state. They were very much well aware of that. But the answer fits perfectly according to the New World Order playbook. So the idea was for Israel to create a counterweight to the PLO and Fatah in order to promote infighting between the Palestinians. It was an attempt by Israel to divide and conquer the Palestinians.
Yes,
That's
exactly. And also, by the way, it's not, I know we're going to get into this. You're talking just about Hamas, but
yeah,
this will also be the same rationale when we get to the other Islamic groups in that
yeah,
region, such as the Muslim Brotherhood.
yeah. Yep, yep. It's the same. It's the same playbook. The playbook is just being used over and over. But I want to get to a more crucial point in this that sometimes gets a little bit overlooked. Is that when Hamas becomes its own beast, kind of becomes uncontained, Israel contains it through forcible elimination. That is exactly the playbook unfolding with the globalization of Islam. You're going to flood Europe with Muslim migrants, help them become dominant, and then control and eliminate them as necessary. So it's this general idea of manipulating Muslims for nefarious New World Order ambitions is why you'll see government collusions with, for example, like the Taliban in Afghanistan, Bin Laden, Al Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, and and so on. But that's we're going to unpack all of that in upcoming streams, and that's all I had for this. So I am done.
Awesome. Well, really great presentation introduction there, Kai. I really appreciate that. A2A says for $5, thank you guys again for everything that you do.
Yeah.
Let's see, we got some more super chats here. Thorin says for $5, the Turkish cabin boy thing was conveyed in a movie in the year 2000. It's called Dark Prince: The True Story of Dracula. Yeah, I think we can reassess Dracula now and think that he was probably more based and perhaps almost orthodox. Cutter being $5. Thank you for the stream tonight, guys. It was really good information. Thank you. All right, guys, appreciate it. Yeah, people are talking about Candace. You're not going to get this level of information from Oprah bullshit that you get from Candace. This is real history, real geopolitics. That's why it's long form. That's why we have 1,000 people and watching it, and Candace has 100,000 people because she does soap opera bullshit. We do real information. So shout out to all the high IQ bros in the chat, and thank you again to Kai for this. And remember, head over to chalk.com, which is the best in supplementation on the internet. The link is in the show chat. Chalk.com, CHOQ.com. Use the promo code J60Life. That's JAY60LIFE to get 60% off all those great products. And you can unsubscribe at any time. Kai's channel is linked in the show description, Orthodox Shahada. He also has the Orthodox Shahada Substack, which has a lot of excellent anti-Monophysite, anti-Islamic apologetics. And Kai, what do we want to get into in the next lecture?
So in the next lecture, we're going to start looking at some of the books that I listed up on the first slide here. One of the ones that I think that's a short introductory onto the topic. It's The Dark Trajectory of Jihad by Brig Barker. So he was an FBI agent working in the field on this. And I think this is very important to talk about the stuff that he talks about in his book before we kind of get into a lot of the other stuff, because he's looking specifically at the psychological makeup of people who become jihadis, who really get drawn into Islam to fight that cause explicitly, and why people do it, how you can tell the signs of somebody who is on that path. I think that's a really important thing to look at, and just to see this kind of psychological manipulation that Muslims exert on other Muslims to influence their behaviors, and also how Islam itself fosters this kind of exploitation. So that's going to help us understand why
Yeah.
a lot of people do what they do, and how these groups that interact with
And
the
yeah, and there's actually a couple chapters in the Paul Williams book as well that deals with the methods and the means of recruitment that Bin Laden, Al Qaeda, and other adjacent entities used. Very similar to what Kai's talking about. And remember, that talk is in my members section. It's also it was too hype for the basically YouTube demonetized it, and I had to put it for the members because there was too much going on in the history of Al Qaeda book. So you can find that in the members section. Be sure and subscribe to Kai, everybody, and thank you so much. Like, share. Remember, this is not going to be promoted in the algo. I need you guys to push this out there. We need shares. We need sending this out. We need you guys to comment below. Tell us the books to read. What books do you want to see us cover in this domain, and hit like and share. Remember to turn on the notifications, guys. If you don't turn on your notifications for live streams, it's not gonna, like, we're just gonna stay here sort of stagnant. So I need you guys to get active because we're battling uphill against algorithmic type stuff. So thank you so much, Kai.
No problem.